In 1974, a Japanese man named Norio Suzuki went to the Philippines looking for three things. He had written them down in his journal before he left Japan. In this order: Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman. He found Onoda first, which is, when you understand what finding Onoda actually meant, either the most extraordinary piece of luck in the history of exploration, or evidence that the panda and the abominable snowman were never really the point. Hiroo Onoda was a 52-year-old Japanese soldier living alone in the jungle on a small island in the Philippines. He had a rifle, he had ammunition, he had a uniform he repaired himself when it wore out. He had a mission. The mission was simple: fight for Japan, hold the island, never surrender. He had received these orders in 1944. He had been following them ever since, for 29 years. Through the end of the Second World War in 1945, through the Korean War, through the Vietnam War, through the moon landing, through the entire reconstruction of Japan from a defeated nation into an economic powerhouse. Through all of it, Hiroo Onoda had been in the jungle, fighting, because nobody had officially told him to stop. Now here is the question this story actually asks: not whether Hiroo Onoda was crazy. He was not crazy. The question is what happens to a human being when loyalty becomes the only thing left, and the thing they are loyal to has already moved on without them. And whether, if you were given an order that consumed your entire life, you would have the courage to question it. Welcome to Untold Archive, the channel that finds the stories of warriors, survivors, and underdogs who faced impossible situations and extracts every lesson they left behind. Today, Hiroo Onoda, the Japanese soldier who kept fighting a war for 29 years, not because he was confused, not because he was broken, but because he had been given an order, and nobody had given him a better one. Stay with this video until the midpoint, because there is one detail in this story, one moment, so specific and so quietly extraordinary, that it will make you rethink everything you believe about loyalty, duty, and the orders you are currently following in your own life. Stay for that, let's go. Part 1: The Soldier Before the Jungle. To understand Hiroo Onoda, you first have to understand the kind of man who entered the Philippine jungle in 1944. This was not a man who was careless or easily confused. He was disciplined, intelligent, and deeply committed to duty. Born in 1922 in Kainan, Wakayama Prefecture, Japan, Onoda grew up in a family that valued education, hard work, and service to the nation. Those values shaped his character long before he ever wore a military uniform. At the age of 20, he joined the Imperial Japanese Army. But unlike thousands of ordinary recruits, Onoda was selected for the Nakano School, Japan's elite military intelligence academy. This was no ordinary training camp. It specialized in producing intelligence officers capable of surviving behind enemy lines for months or even years without support. Students were taught guerrilla warfare, survival, intelligence gathering, sabotage, and psychological resilience. More importantly, they were trained to think independently. They learned to distrust enemy information, resist psychological manipulation, and never abandon their mission simply because circumstances became difficult. In December 1944, Hiroo Onoda received his assignment. He was sent to Lubang Island in the Philippines with one clear mission: conduct guerrilla warfare against Allied forces and delay their advance for as long as possible. His commander gave him one order that would define the rest of his life. Part 2: The war ends. He does not. In August 1945, World War II came to an end. After the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan formally surrendered to the Allied forces. Across Asia and the Pacific, soldiers laid down their weapons and returned home. But on Lubang Island, Hiroo Onoda remained hidden in the jungle. Aircraft flew overhead, dropping leaflets announcing that the war was over. Radio broadcasts repeated the same message. Search parties called out to Japanese soldiers, urging them to surrender peacefully. Onoda examined every piece of information carefully. His intelligence training immediately raised suspicion. Everything he had learned at the Nakano school told him that enemy forces would attempt psychological warfare. Fake announcements, forged documents, and false promises were exactly the kinds of tactics he had been trained to expect. His conclusion seemed perfectly logical to him. If the enemy wanted him to surrender, then the enemy would lie. Therefore, the leaflets were fake. Therefore, Japan had not surrendered. Therefore, his mission continued. Part 3: The Man Who Searched. When the war officially ended, Onoda was not alone. 3 other Japanese soldiers remained with him in the jungle. Together, they continued conducting guerrilla operations, stealing food, avoiding capture, and occasionally attacking local forces. Over the years, the group slowly disappeared. One soldier surrendered after realizing the war had truly ended. Another was killed during a firefight. Eventually, only Onoda and Corporal Kinshichi Kazuka remained. For nearly 18 years, they survived together in the jungle, believing every search party was part of an elaborate Allied trap. Back in Japan, Hiroo Onoda had become something of a legend. His family knew he was alive. The Japanese government organized numerous rescue missions. His relatives traveled to Lubang Island, calling his name through loudspeakers. Personal letters were dropped from airplanes. Photographs of his family were left behind. Official announcements explained that Japan had surrendered decades earlier. Part 4: The Midpoint Beat, The Order. Suzuki spent several days talking with Onoda. He showed him newspapers, photographs, magazines, modern clothing. Evidence from nearly 3 decades of history. Patiently, he explained that the Second World War had ended in 1945 and that Japan had rebuilt itself into an entirely different country. Onoda listened respectfully. He believed Suzuki was sincere, but he still refused to surrender. Then he explained why. He had received his orders from his commanding officer. Only that officer had the authority to release him from duty. No amount of evidence could replace a direct military order. Suzuki returned to Japan and searched for Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, Onoda's former commander. By then, Taniguchi was an elderly man working in a bookstore after retiring from military life. When he learned that Onoda was still alive, he agreed to travel to the Philippines. Part 5: What Happened After the Jungle. When Hiroo Onoda finally walked out of the jungle, the world was stunned. His military uniform had been repaired countless times but was still wearable. His rifle remained fully functional. His ammunition was carefully maintained. Despite nearly 3 decades of isolation, he was physically strong and mentally alert. Because several people had died during his guerrilla campaign, many wondered whether he would face prosecution. Instead, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos granted him a pardon, recognizing that Onoda had honestly believed he was still carrying out military orders. Part 6: What Hiroo Onoda Teaches Us. At first glance, Hiroo Onoda's story seems impossible. A man continued fighting a war for 29 years after it had ended. Yet beneath the extraordinary circumstances lies a lesson that applies to all of us. Every person lives according to instructions learned somewhere in the past. Some came from parents, some from teachers, some from painful experiences, some from our own fears. His story reminds us to ask an important question: who gave us the beliefs we still follow? Do those people still have authority over our lives? Are we defending ourselves against threats that disappeared years ago? Sometimes the hardest act of courage is not continuing the fight. Sometimes it is recognizing that the war is already over and having the strength to finally walk out of the jungle. Subscribe to Untold Archive. Every Tuesday and Friday we find the people history forgot and give them back the attention they earned. Next video: a man who voluntarily walked into Auschwitz. Not as a prisoner, as a spy. From the inside, he organized a resistance. He escaped. And he lived to tell the world what was happening inside when the world was not yet ready to believe it. That video goes up Tuesday. You absolutely do not want to miss it. Untold Archive. Stories history buried. People who refuse to break.